it's absolutely important that we find something to do. We live in this life not just to enjoy our life, and not just to enjoy the many gifts that God has put us in life, but God has put us in this world to fulfill the purposes that God has predestined for us to live out. Jesus desires that we would all come to a relationship with Him. We cannot please God without first believing in God, without first believing in what God has done with us, without first accepting the history of what God has done with the Jewish and the Christian people. Those are non-negotiables. But once we have done that, once we have started a relationship with Christ, once we have opened up our hearts and confessed Jesus, we need to find something to do. But what does God want us to do? Well, He wants us to believe, so we ought to study the Bible. We ought to learn more about God. We ought to learn as much as we can from godly Christians who have walked before us and who are walking with us, who can encourage us. But we just don't learn and do nothing. We need to find something to do. We need to find a way to live out this life of faith. We need to live out the commands that God has given us. And this includes the pursuit of holiness. We will never achieve holiness in this life, but we are commanded to pursue holiness, to seek after weeding out as much of the sin in our life as we can. We'll never do a perfect job. We'll never complete the task, but we are commanded to start the task. When God saves us, He sets us free from our sin, not so that we could be saved in our sin. And when God delivers us from our sin, when God saves us and leads us into a pure life, that should cause us to praise God. Praising God is part of the purpose of this life. It's part of what we are commanded to do. Praising God doesn't mean that we just sing songs. We can praise God in nature, as I am driving through nature, driving through the beautiful mountains of God's creation. We can praise God in poetry, in art. We can praise God in many unique and creative ways. Ways that aren't always clear to us. We can praise God and worship God and fulfill the commandments of God by serving others. This is a requirement that God gives to all believers, that we serve other Christians. Once we've come to maturity in our own faith, we will be filled with an irresistible urge to spread our faith. To mature in adulthood is to desire to reproduce. When we reach spiritual maturity, we are going to desire to reproduce. And this is going to take a couple forms. We're going to want to reproduce maturity that we have in other believers by building up their faith. And we're going to want to reproduce by sharing the good news of how all who believe and confess their sins, putting their trust alone in Jesus Christ, trusting in no other God beside Him, beside the righteous, holy, holy, holy Trinity. There is no hope that we can find in any other. And when we reach maturity, we will want to see others be filled with the kind of life, with the kind of faith that we ourselves have in God. This is natural. This is normal. That if we truly experience God for who He is, that we want to see our faith come out in the lives of other people